Hey everybody, it's Nick from Android Headlines, and this is our review of the Sony Xperia X Performance. Sony's flagships have taken a different turn this year, and instead of putting the same specs into different sized devices, Sony has instead taken 3 different sets of specs and put them in essentially the same sized body. The Xperia X Performance is the top dog of the new crew, coming in at $700 and just a hair larger than the Xperia X we reviewed a month ago. It's still the same 5-inch 1080p tri-luminous display on the front, but that's really where the similarities end. Inside is a Snapdragon 820 chipset, Adreno 530 GPU, 3 gigs of RAM, and 32 gigs of internal storage with micro SD card support. This is a significantly beefier chipset than what's found in the Xperia X, and it feels that way in just about everything you do on the phone. The 5-inch 1080p display on the front is essentially the same one you'll find on the Xperia X though, and that's a bit of a disappointment in many ways. Many $700 flagships now ship with OLED panels for many reasons, but having an LCD panel just feels a bit old in so many ways. Sure, it's bright and has pretty great viewing angles, but there are quite a few negatives to this display overall. Black levels are always an issue with LCDs, so that's no surprise here. But what's odd is the amount of light bleed from the edges of the screen, something that's very noticeable in darker environments and as you tilt it to the side. The refresh rate of the panel is also extremely poor, and you'll find tons of trailing and ghosting as if this were an LCD from 2001 or something equally bad. It's really quite weird. Surprisingly, this doesn't affect VR performance too much though, where I found the Xperia X Performance to be a rather decent VR player. The poor persistence rate of the display really didn't affect things much at all, something that is a little bit odd given how bad it is in other areas of use with the screen, but there was only a slight blur added to movement in VR and really not enough to bother me. A Snapdragon 820 paired with a 1080p resolution of the screen also means that this one is going to perform better than some other flagships out there, and the fact that it's only a 5-inch screen also means that it's a bit more pixel dense than something like a OnePlus 3, which also is 1080p but has a 5.5-inch screen. Unlike the Xperia X, the Xperia X Performance is fully IP68 dust and water resistant. This means it's sealed completely against dust ingress, and for water it can withstand 1 meter depth up to 30 minutes. Sony has been the unofficial swimming partner of many throughout its years of the Xperia Z phones, and while the Xperia X broke that trend, the X Performance picks it right back up. I gave it the full run through underwater and it gets a big thumbs up in this area, especially since it's a metal chassis that's going to stand up to damage protection better than a fully glass one would. Do your best not to drop it for sure, but inherently it's going to be a little more resilient to drops and such than something like a Galaxy S7 would. While we're on the subject of hardware, it's worth noting that the coating Sony uses on the metal body feels a lot more like plastic than metal in some way LG's coating on the G5 did. This definitely gives it a bit of a cheaper feel than something like an HTC 10 or OnePlus 3 would, with their more raw metal designs. Button-wise, you'll find the dedicated shutter button on the right side located near the bottom, a design that's integral in using the phone to take pictures when wet, and one that makes it feel a lot more like a point-and-shoot digital camera anyway. The volume rocker is in a pretty unusual location, but one that I ended up loving due to the ease of pressing it when using the device as an actual phone. What's not so hot is the power button, but that's not to say there's anything inherently wrong with the concave power button placed on the side, rather the fact that Sony has yet again decided to remove the fingerprint scanning feature for the US variant of the Xperia X Performance. Why Sony continues to make this terrible decision is beyond me, and it's something no company should ever do at this point, much less on a $700 flagship, especially when every other region of the world gets the same phone with the fingerprint scanner built in. Having a 2,700 mAh battery inside of a Snapdragon 820 powered phone is likely not a great idea either, something that seems a bit odd given the relative thickness of this phone too. The Xperia X Performance is exactly 1 millimeter thicker than the Xperia X, yet the battery is only 80 mAh larger. Compare this to the 3,000 mAh battery inside the Galaxy S7, which is 1 millimeter thinner than the Xperia X Performance, and you might be scratching your head as to what Sony is doing here. As you might expect with a smaller battery, the battery life itself is worse than other flagships. I had a hard time reaching 3 hours of screen on time in any given day, although in normal use I barely sneaked through a full day of use without having to plug the phone in. Sony's stamina mode will help things, but not too much, and it ends up being a bit of a disappointment in this area. Plus, it doesn't charge quite as quick as some of these other phones either. One thing Sony is better about than pretty much anyone else in the industry, though, is sound quality on their phones. Sure, there's plenty of competition out there, especially now with the high-res audio trend really kicking in, but Sony has been at the forefront of this trend for a while now, and it really shows. You'll find native 24-bit audio here just like on a handful of other flagships, as well as Sony's own DSEE-HX mode that interpolates plain Jane audio and attempts to turn it into high-res audio with pretty good success. It's not quite the same as native 24-bit audio files, but it's incredibly good and does an excellent job at mimicking the quality. Wireless audio aficionados will be incredibly happy here too, as there's aptX support as well as Sony's own LDAC wireless technology. Even the stereo front-facing speakers on the device itself are downright phenomenal, especially when placed on a table with that virtual surround sound mode enabled. Rich, deep sound fills the room, and while it's obviously not a replacement for a higher quality sound system, it'll get the job done with little complaints, and much better than the vast majority of phones on the market for sure. Android 6.0 Marshmallow ships with this device, and on top of that, Sony's minimal UI includes some extra features as well as some fairly robust theming engine support. You'll find dozens upon dozens of different themes in the Play Store, some of which are free and some are maybe $1 to $2, but they theme the entire system and quite a few of them look really good too. Sony also provides tons of content and tie-ins, including lots of freebies, extra exclusive content, and plenty of other things that the What's New app keeps you informed of. Some users will find these tie-ins annoying though, and will likely think they're just ads or spam without a doubt. There are plenty of other Sony services and tie-ins as well, like native DualShock 4 support out of the box for excellent mobile gaming, especially if you're wanting to game harder in VR by using your phone. Lastly, we'll take a look at the camera, which has always been a bit of a mixed bag for Sony phones. Last year's Xperia Z5 showed some serious promise in the camera department, even if the software tended to overexpose shots quite a bit by default. This year, Sony seems to have learned little from that experience, but overall the shots normally exhibit some incredible qualities. At 23 megapixels, you might expect the absolute best in detail from any phone on the market, but that's going to vary wildly depending on the amount of light present. Cramming 23 megapixels on a sensor small enough to fit in a mobile phone inherently means that those pixels will be smaller than most other sensors on the market, and as such you'll find the low light abilities of the Xperia X Performance can leave a little bit to be desired sometimes. Nighttime shots in particular suffer from this, as they are either overly dark when comparing to other phones, or the ISO is going to jump up to super high to make up for a small pixel size, and we're going to see that in some severe visual artifacts that crop up when this happens. These were only apparent in nighttime shots though, and even relatively low light shots didn't have these issues. Detail in most situations is fantastic, although not wildly better than the best 12 or 16 megapixel shooters out there, despite what the numbers might make you think. Sony still overexposes too much, and this can only be corrected with manual mode, since there's no easy quick exposure adjustments in the software's auto mode. Yet again, it seems like the software is a bigger problem than the actual sensor itself, which, if you've used Sony phones in the past, that's probably no surprise. At 13 megapixels, the front-facing camera is chock full of detail and did a great job of balancing out scenes and producing some incredible quality selfies. Video mode wasn't quite as good though, and that's not to say the 1080p modes are bad or anything. Quite the opposite really, especially with Sony's intelligent stabilization algorithms. Rather, the problem here is a basic lack of 4K recording, something that makes zero sense for a company like Sony that likes to push a lot of 4K content, and a 2016 flagship. Remember, this is a phone that's powered by a 23 megapixel sensor and a Snapdragon 820 SoC, both of which are fully capable of 4K recording in every way. Hopefully Sony will fix this in an update, as this is completely a software restriction and not a hardware one. Overall, the Xperia X Performance is an admirable addition to the Sony Xperia family of flagships, but at $700 this does little to set itself apart from the pack out there, especially phones that are equally well spec'd or built and cost significantly less. Sony as a premium brand seems to be fading, and with questionable decisions like no 4K recording and a lack of fingerprint scanning in the US, the Xperia X Performance is doomed to fail from the start in some markets without a doubt. Is it a bad phone? Definitely not. But it has limitations or issues that other phones in this class don't have, and ultimately that's a big problem for a company that was once considered the forefront of digital technology. We hope you enjoyed this video and will subscribe to us for more content. Check us out on your favorite social media network, and don't forget to check out AndroidHeadlines.com for 24/7 Android-based news coverage. Thanks for watching, and until next time.